Okay, hey everyone, I'm Panera, and we are here to talk about Zerg Ecology. Before I introduce everyone, I want to thank everybody who's been sending me emails and leaving comments on YouTube. I've gotten a lot of feedback about what we should do next. I've heard something like Tyrannids from Warhammer or something like that. I've had the most amount of requests for those, so we will be doing those in the future at some time. I'm not sure when that will be. But I do promise you we will get around to doing that. So leave your suggestions for things that we can cover beyond StarCraft, because eventually we're going to run out of material within StarCraft.
No, we're not.
Alright, I think what we should do after we do the Tyranids is we should do the space orcs for Warhammer 40k.
Ha! Maybe, yeah.
That'd be sick.
I don't know enough about it, so.
You should. They're awesome.
Okay.
They're like
Back to the introduction, anybody?
I've actually one more little thing. I've had a few people sending me emails wondering how they can help. If you don't want to actually physically be on the show with us, what you can do is what? Someone's playing music in the background. Stop it. What you can actually do is you can tell your friends about the show. You can tell your grandma about the show. Tell your cat. Tell everybody about the show. And I don't want to be that guy, but at some point on YouTube, everyone is that guy. You know, the whole subscribe and like and comment and talk about the show, because the more people we have, the more opinions we get, the more contributions we get, means the better the quality is going to be ultimately. So that's the best thing you can do if you don't actually want to join us.
Let me put it this way. The dislike bar had better be the size of Justin Bieber's non-existent dick.
Yeah, he actually is wearing a male version of leggings now. They're called
There's no such thing as a male version.
Yeah, they're called meggings, and he is officially wearing women's clothing. So
put the homophobic seal guy in the mid right there.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. Okay, anyway, so who we have with us today? I'll introduce them. We've got Persuvius.
Howdy.
The good old PotatoLiSK.
Salt to potato.
Yes, and the Toninator.
Race the waiting launch orders.
Oh, nice. Okay, so you get to do the pair and stuff. I was not expecting that. That's
I thought I had both of those covered between the Battlecruiser Thor and Ghost in the past few episodes.
I know you were doing it. I was like, man, that is a good idea. I play Zerg, so what am I gonna do? I'm an Overlord.
Yeah, just be like Husky and do the Overlord sound over and over again so people get sick of it.
Oh,
okay, so we're talking about Zerg ecology, guys. All right, what does this mean exactly? Well, the Zerg are a superorganism. They are obviously living creatures, and as such, they do have environmental pressures as well as artificial pressures from, like, say, attacking Protoss and things like that. So what that's going to end up looking like is how the hatchery from the drone state, say, like you'll land a drone on a planet and it turns into a hatchery. Where does it go from here, and why does it go this way?
I have a better question.
What?
How did the drone get from planet A to planet B?
Presumably from the Overlord's ventral sacs.
But the Overlords don't explode when they go through space?
Nope, no. Overlords can travel through space. That's canon.
Yep.
That's kind of half the purpose of the whole Zelnaga race, giving them the ability to do such.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't play StarCraft 1. I'm too young.
Yeah, they can... How old are you?
18.
Okay, I'm 19.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So anyway...
I had no childhood, don't worry.
Yeah, that's fair enough. You were locked in a basement. You will be educated. We will educate you. So anyway, we start with the hatchery with 3 larvae. And if you look at the tech tree, we'll actually put this up for you guys. The sort of bare bones minimum that you get usually is hatchery and extractor. Now we can actually, this is actually why I was so excited to do this topic. We can actually use the metagame to kind of talk about how things go as the hive develops. So what's standard now is pretty much plunking down another hatchery ASAP near some resources.
And then getting Infestor GG Lord.
Well, that comes later. That comes later. Don't worry, we'll cover that. Don't worry.
I'll cover that. Single-handedly chew out every single...
All right. Episode over. That's it. You've ruined it. Did
the episode end already? All right, guys.
No, we're still going. Still going. I was joking.
Okay.
Okay, well, getting back to the hatchery, here we go. But as we know, the hatchery, along with a lot of the other Zerg buildings, have a similarity to each other, and we see that they're built up, and they have some sort of orifice, breathing, to keep it alive, being it is an organic being.
Spawning pool doesn't have one.
Well, that could be argued from the gas pool that sits on top of it.
Wait, what are you talking
It's
about?
not gas, dude. It's liquid.
The extractor?
No, we're talking about the
Well,
spawning
what
pool.
comes out of that?
Guys, the spine crawler doesn't have an orifice that we can see.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So anyway,
Like I said, a majority.
yeah. It might be more a more passive type of respiration, like using
Tree.
and stuff like that. But anyways, so within the sort of common Zerg development in game, you end up with 1 or 2 extra hatcheries, and it really shows an aggressive need or desire for any new fledgling hive to basically take all the resources that they can.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
this is a really good indicator when you have a new hatchery that they are looking to undergo a rapid explosion in drone count first of all, and that's just a single cast into something a little bit later on.
Reminds me of locusts.
yeah.
Reminds me of locusts, how they just go from one place to the next and clear everything out.
Oh yeah, when they have those big cycles, yeah, they're pretty nasty.
Yes. I take
It
it you're
reminds
also
me
an
of
locust
humans.
expert?
What's that?
No, we haven't gone through the whole entire planet yet.
Yeah,
Not yet.
not yet. We will.
Not yet.
Wait for it.
So basically, that's sort of step 1 in the development, right? This rapid expansion, and from there things kind of seem to stabilize. They go into their spawning pool and start to look for look at having more scouting abilities, things like Zerglings and Zergling speed. These are pretty much never skipped, and it's really important because the Zerg are very reactionary, of course, so they need to know what's going on. They get their overlords out, they sort of start annexing territory with creep, using queens and things like this, and this is sort of the next important step in the development of a hive. And if I know you're going to harp on me again, I know, but we're going to talk about ants. Deal with it, okay?
I'm dealing with it.
When you start with
Ooh.
when you start with the new ant queen, she starts off on her own. She will go and start off her colony after being fertilized by a male, and she actually makes maybe 1 or 2 different casts, and that's it. It's not until the hive actually develops into the million mark, or maybe less, depending on the species. But once they start becoming established, they end up with they end up with this need for more niches, right? So as the hive develops, seeing a very similar thing, where as they go along, they're actually adding on different casts. So depending on whether it's sort of the spawning pool is a very important tech structure as far as determining the route that the hive is going to take. So
it also provides the exponential growth it requires before an expansion. So we see that in many other types of bugs, not just ants, but we see it in termites and bees, hornets, wasps as well.
Yeah, so those are all hymenopterans, except for the termites, which are orthopterans. But they're all the superorganisms basically. That's a good point. This is really common with superorganisms, which is why we need to compare them to the Zerg. So once you sort of have these original scouts out, they can go hyper aggressive. Which is something that you don't necessarily see in ants. They don't necessarily go hyper aggressive and make, like, say, the equivalent of like 25, 26 Zerglings and just retard flood a base, right? You don't necessarily see that. What you do see is as a hive expands its territory and its creep, it does become more and more aggressive. And depending on what the pressures might be, if you're having a lot of, say, soldier ants from a rival colony coming in, you're going to alternatively produce a lot more soldiers, or the mega workers and things like this. So that's where things like roaches come in. And as the hive, in fact, ages, you start seeing, as we covered with the Baneling episode, the ability for these older individuals, or perhaps younger individuals, are being forced into doing it because the Zerg, they like to force evolution and natural processes, but you're starting to see this sort of dichotomy once you're done the spawning pool, which is where you're seeing things like the roaches and the banelings and things like that.
And more queens.
Yeah, and more queens. Yeah, queens are essential for because they serve two purposes. They obviously give you more larvae, which I mean, is never a bad thing if you're looking to expand, but they also annex territory, which is really huge. You could sort of presumably say that anything on the creep is Zerg territory, right? I mean, that's pretty standard thinking.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So you could even extend this to a certain distance beyond the creep, where you're seeing more and more of Zerg presence, be it drone scouts, Zerglings, overlords, whatever. They sort of expand beyond the creep. But as far as pure territory defense, you don't often see a Zerg defending off creep. Unless there's some new meta I'm missing.
Yeah, that's true.
How do they take their thirds?
What's that? Why do they take their thirds?
No, how do they can't expand on creep without being on creep, as you said?
They can. They absolutely can, and they do. And the goal is to link those two together, right? So you're making a whole separate hatchery system, but that is included into the core hive if it's within proximity.
Yeah.
If it's far enough away, like let's say on the other side of the planet, that's going to probably become its own hive, right? Its own hive network and things like that.
Yeah, which would then in turn have its own evolution. It wouldn't mimic the same exact pattern.
No, absolutely not. Like imagine, for example, you get a lot of, say, sandstorms on the other side of the planet, and that would tear apart Zergling wings and their frail little arms and stuff. So you're going to want to produce more roaches, right? Whereas, say you've got a nice lush tropical rainforest, you're probably going to want to produce more Zerglings because they're more mobile and they're able to sort of go in and around a lot of that jungly territory, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Precisely, yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
And adversely, it works the same with an artificial pressure as well. If you're having a lot of Marines showing up at your doorstep repeatedly, you're probably going to either choose to have roaches, or you're going to have...
choice.
Yeah, not a bad choice against Marines, or you're going to want to get the Baneling tech out.
Better choice.
So you kind of get this dichotomy of pressures that ultimately end up doing the same thing, which is so cool about the Zerg design. You actually end up with with the ability to function with or without the artificial pressure and the use for these units.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because all of the Zerg units make sense if you think of the Zerg. The Zerg's whole idea is to conquer a planet. And so it makes sense that, let's say you have this new drone, this new hatchery on a planet, and if you build other hatcheries, then they're connecting into a big hive system, and you build a spawning pool, and you have a queen, and the queen immediately is the thing that lets you conquer territory. I think that was really interesting that you said that.
Yes.
Because that's what they want to do. They want to conquer all the territory they can. And
assimilate it too. So they're not only just conquering, they are consuming everything, and that includes the natural resource of various organisms. So imagine the creep comes up to like a beach or something. Presumably, got some sort of aquatic scout. I don't know. I mean, there is Abyssal City out there.
I have a question about that. So the Zerg mass produce so much, and they're able to conquer a planet in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
What are the after effects? Once they do consume the planet, I mean, does everything there just die off, or do they preserve itself by some means? Or
remember what happened to Tarsonis?
Do you remember what happened to Char?
Yeah.
No.
There's nothing left of the life on the planets after the Zerg conquer it. It's
also a giant burning ball of fire and land.
I think Tarsonis is a primary example, though. If you think about Tarsonis and even Marsara, you had a lot more going on as far as critters and stuff like that, or even not Shakuris, Ire. That's the one I'm thinking of. Ire. If you look at Ire post Zerg invasion, it's a shithole.
Yeah. The difference is Marsara was actually glassed by the Protoss, so there's definitely nothing left there. So that's not a great example. Ire's a really good one, but there are still actually scattered Protoss on Ire.
Huh.
So, the entire planet hasn't been consumed. I think Tarsonis really is the best example where just...
Yeah, they made it a new capital kind of thing, right? They took it over and stuff. Whereas Ire, they kind of they hit it like a hammer. They really did. They didn't colonize it. They just gutter stomped it. And that was the goal. They wanted to end the Protoss. They didn't care about the resources on Ire. Whereas on Tarsonis, they did. Then again, they made a significant investment in bringing the Overmind to Ire, so you'd think that maybe they would have done a better job colonizing it. But at that point in the lore, they were kind of going through a lot, getting their asses kicked by the UED and stuff like that. So,
well, how do you know that they didn't want to colonize it? The thing is, when the first Overmind was killed by Tassadar, all of the Zerg on Ire went rampant. Like every Zerg.
Yeah, that's true.
That's because the Cerebrates weren't in sync anymore, and so they each had their own little agenda, and they just kind of went every which way.
Absolutely, and that's what happens in an ant colony when you have multiple queens. The queens that are done developing sort of spread off to their own devices and develop their own hives and stuff like that, right? So it works in a similar sort of way where, when you only have one source of sort of control, and that's one hive, for example, sort of the argument kind of gets disjoined a little bit. I kind of lost my thought. But anyway, so as we move down the tech tree, you get the option for some things like evolution chambers, just things that, can make their creatures more mobile, more difficult to handle, more resilient, things like that. And then you hit the layer tech. And so the layer tech, to me, it's increasing in volume. It's increasing, like, the building itself is much bigger, as far as I know. I mean, scale size, I know we've got scale issues in the game, deal with whatever. Shut up, kitty. And
Terrible person.
He just came blasting into the room. It was quite funny. So anyway, the layer sort of is larger, and by then you usually have like a macro hatch as well. So you're really starting to ramp up the production in layer. And that's actually something that we see in the metagame as well. That's when you start seeing your roach maxes, you start seeing the infestor tech come out, or in ZVZ, this is even more, I believe it was Sort of who was doing this in...
the Hydra tech?
Yeah, the Hydra tech. He was really destroying with Hydras.
Hydra did that at BWC against Aurora.
We should talk about the HydraLiSK and why it is useful. Because
it's not. Period.
There's a reason for it. That's why there's a HydraLiSK den. The Zerg don't do things that aren't useful.
Well, the HydraLiSK itself originally was sort of the backbone of the Zerg army, right? And they're sort of really far-ranging warrior with the grooved spines and things like that. They also have some pretty impressive hardware in their forelimbs where they can tear things apart. And I believe in Heart of the Swarm they get a little dance. No, they have a dance in...
they do have the dance in Wings of Liberty.
That's something you can't ignore. I mean, that's...
which is pretty good.
Yeah, so HydraLiSKs are a little bit more in Wings of Liberty to me because they really need that creep support. To me, they're more of a stay-at-home guardian, and they're more of it's again, like the ants, you get certain castes that go out farther for food, and some that sort of stay around and manage various nests and things like that. And there's even ones that they farm fungus and they never see the light of day and things like that. So really, the Hydras to me are more of that sort of stay-at-home caste. They're not tough. They need the shelter of the hive. But that said, something wants to step on the creep, they're going to be hit like a hammer or hit with a truck basically with a whole bunch of HydraLiSKs because of the DPS.
Yeah. So I have a question for you. Why is it that you think that HydraLiSKs are worse in Wings of Liberty than they were in the Brood War?
Death of the Overmind.
I believe it's the light unit tag that does it. So with them, they invested less into mobility, and they invested less into armor. But the trade-off for that, I believe they do more DPS.
That's true. I think they have the highest DPS in the game, other than Stin Marines.
Yeah, they're pretty nasty. So I think that's the thing, right? They're meant as if you want to come on the creep, the way that they've been redesigned by the Zerg is that you're welcome to come on the creep, but you're going to get punished quite heavily for it. And that's their role, right? They're there to punish any sort of pushback that the environment or the, any opposition gives them, which is a really good fail-safe to have. So it's kind of like when you've got an ant colony and something comes in to invade. The pushback is a lot stronger. You get all the casts storing in. They'll even have workers go in between the mandibles of some of these, like, beetles and stuff, sacrificing themselves just to, like, eliminate that threat, right?
Yeah.
The pushback is a lot stronger. And that makes sense when you're hyper-aggressive about your territory.
Yeah. There's something else that I think a lot of people ignore in terms of QQ balance finding. They're like, oh, Hydras are so bad, this is terrible. Keep in mind, the only reason Hydras are worse now than in Brood War other than, they're a little bit slower, is because of new technology by the Terran and Protoss, which seems specifically designed to deal with the Hydrolisks.
That's a really good point. Like things like the
Colossus is the big one.
Yeah, the Colossus was around before. I believe it's an ancient.
No, it wasn't used during the Brood War or during Starcraft 1 era because the Protoss had.
Yeah, it existed before when they were doing like clan wars, right?
Yeah.
It
existed
decided it would be
aeons ago.
Yeah, exactly. So they brought back that technology, knowing that it would specifically deal with this. Because let's be honest, Hydrolisks were a rampant threat in Brood War.
Oh yeah, in DVP you could just go 5-hatch Hydra and win the game if you were just better. It was brutal.
Yeah. So there had to be a way to deal with them, right? And so with this reworking of trade, they were actually looking to increase the DPS to make them hit even harder, and as a result are being punished for it by the Protoss.
Yeah. So the Roach is kind of the replacement for that now.
That's a really awesome point. Yeah, the Roach actually does provide that really good synergy. And of course, Hydras aren't made in all situations, but you do always see a spire, and you always see an infestation pit, pretty much in late game Zerg versus thing. Then the Infestors are we covered them, and fungal growth. Did we do? I don't know if we did Infestor video or not.
No, you just did a write-up on the forums.
Oh, okay, I just did a write-up. Yeah, we'll do Infestors some other time. Anyway, Infestors, they are. This is where the hive kind of starts to reach critical mass, where they're able to start farming other organisms, things like Terrans for the infested Terran eggs. According to the lore, they just like swallow up injured Terrans, and just.
That's a terrible way to go.
Yeah, it would suck. It would be horrible.
I don't even think they chew. You just get swallowed.
Yeah, you just get swallowed, and then
assimilated.
You're in this big gut that has this, and I imagine infestors are actually quite big because the lore is they came from a superorganism themselves. So they were like a big organism that moved around. They're like a molten hive.
Yeah.
So they're incorporated them and are now using, I imagine using these other organisms that are inside of their, gut, I guess, to not only sort of prepare the infested Terrans and to keep them sort of in stasis, but also to farm the fungus, which is not that hard. Just go out, get some plant matter, dump it in. The genus Atta, the leafcutters, does this quite well.
All the time.
Yeah, they actually are so effective at collecting plant material that this genus actually is a threat to cattle ranchers. Cattle ranchers actually dynamite and pour cement down the ant colonies because they actually outcompete the cattle.
Wow.
And so if you scale this up to a level of Zerg using the Infestor, that's pretty impressive.
I don't think dynamite or cement will cut it.
No, at least you need at least a stim pack, I would think.
Yeah.
At least a battle cruiser.
At least a C-14 gas rifle.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and so then you get this other interesting tech structure, this spire, and this is where Zerg really gets aggressive. I mean, the Corruptors are a little bit more stay-at-home. Broodlords as well are sort of for that slow push-out to sort of just... Presumably by the time you get Broodlords, you've been hammering an opponent, you've been harassing them, you've been, having all these skirmishes. The Broodlords themselves are sort of their answer to say, okay, well now we're done with you. We're putting out our toughest unit. Deal with it, right? If you can't, end of story. With the Mutalisk, though, you start seeing this extremely aggressive and speedy push outward, and they're often accompanied with speedbanes and speedlings as well. Yeah. And this sort of is a new sort of phase in the hive development where they really are getting hyper aggressive, right? They're out to kill your workers. They're out, if you don't guard yourself, you're going to die, basically at this point. So they become a really strong threat at layer attack. That's something we see in the metagame as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Mutalisks are the Zergiest unit that there is because they're so fast and they're so in your face. And what they really do, what Mutalisks are really good at, is buying time. And time is all the Zerg need, right? Because if you look at lore or if you look at, any pro game, it takes anywhere from, for pros, it takes 20 minutes and they have everything they could ever possibly want. Or, if you look at lore, Chowsar and Marsar were consumed in about a day. Like 1 day. Like,
Holy shit.
if you keep enemies busy with something like a PotatoLiSK, then it's really, really scary, and I think that's why they're so prevalent in the Swarm.
You actually, that's a good point. This is actually where you see them take their 4th and 5th base as well. So accompanying with this outward push that you're seeing Zergling run-bys, PotatoLiSK flybys, and things like that, you're actually seeing the outward push. Heavy creep push, heavy everything, right? They're teching like crazy.
They're exploding outwards.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's actually a very necessary thing to have. I didn't actually think of that. That's great.
Yeah. This is why I go PotatoLiSK in every matchup, because I don't like Infestors.
Ling Bling Mute is way more fun than Roaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not hard to... Basically, in comparison, Ling Bling Mute actually requires micro.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you get the Nydus Swarm as well, which is really cool because it allows you to... You can connect...
Load units up into the Zerg collective asshole.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, you can... It's cool because you can connect bases, like island bases. You can connect anything you want. You can do it. It's just a really good way to make them even more mobile than they already are.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Nydus network in terms of multiple colonies on the same planet coordinating.
Yeah.
Right? Because, the thing about the Zerg is individually they're not all that scary, and in small numbers they're really not that scary. But when you have large numbers of them in coordinated assaults is when it's really quite frightening. So the Nydus Worm really lets that happen. As far as I know, from a lore perspective, it's all done with psionics, and I don't know if we've talked about that on the show yet.
A little bit. There's I suggested that it was probably pheromonal as well as body language and some other stuff. But
that's a neat idea. I hadn't thought of that. But as far as troop movements, the Nydus network is insanely powerful, especially for things like I don't know if you guys know this, but it actually makes creep as well.
Yeah.
That's what I had a question about, is like, if no other unit aside from the drone can produce creep, aside from the Overlord, but
And the
you don't
Queen.
need an actual Overlord.
Yeah.
Well, the Queen doesn't produce it right in the middle of nothing. It produces it from creep.
Yeah, she pushes it outward. That's right.
So why is it that this random placement of a Nydus network leaves creep in a base?
Because the Nydus Worm, as it comes up from the ground, it opens its mouth and vomits all over the place.
Yeah, it uses in a very aggressive way. I had an email about that actually. Someone suggested that they use it as a lubricant and others.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, because when you have an
actually very
Ultralis going up your
And,
ass and coming out your mouth, you're going to need a lube.
And it
At
kind
least
of
one.
true, and the guy made a really good point. I can't remember your name. I'm sorry. I'm sure you'll hear this and post on the comments and tell me I'm terrible. But they also use it to inject creep into things like sand and rock. This guy suggested. And that actually works like a process called fracking, which is really popular now in geology. Basically, they take, I believe it's steam or water or something, and they force it down into some shale, which cracks and fractures the shale, and then the gas comes out. So it's actually really effective. So that's a pretty good suggestion. But anyway, we're getting a little bit off track. But kudos to you
Always off track.
emailing me that, and see everyone. You can email us and leave us comments, and we'll assimilate your information and thank you for it, even though I can't remember your name.
Yeah.
Sure.
Assimilation success.
The other thing is, as lubrication, a lot of people have said, how can they move between the worms so quickly? Well, if they're lubricated, this is going to sound ridiculous, but awesome. Imagine a giant slip and slide.
Well, they also
just immediately.
Wait, that's my job to bullshit stuff like that.
Wait.
I get that reference, but I mean, you could also think of it like if it's a throat, you don't slowly swallow something; it goes down quickly.
They also use peristalsis.
I don't know what that is.
That's
the squishing mechanism that forces stuff through your intestines and your
yeah, it's the passive
of your esophagus.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty. They repurposed it, which they're really good for. But anyways, so this is sort of where they start getting this really aggressive tech at the layer, and it's not till the hive that you see the super major workers, the UltraLiSKs, come out, and these would be not only useful for what we're familiar with, but they'd be really useful in let's say there's a big a whole bunch of boulders and stuff like that. Well, even if you put creep all over them, they're still going to be cumbersome. So you could perhaps use them to, push the boulders or clear out forests and things like that. I mean, they've got tremendous utility as a large worker as well.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah. In terms of combat, I think it's pretty interesting that at Hatch Tech it's basically like stay alive, and then at Lair Tech it's basically like expand outwards and explode. And then at Hive Tech, it's crush all resistance. And I think that's a very, it's like a step-by-step how to conquer a planet from the Zerg perspective.
That's a great point.
If you imagine, the Zerg spore or drone or whatever, I'm mixing up alien races that assimilate things, and let's say by Lair Tech they have like half a planet and they're just expanding and getting all these things. Then there's like huge battles going on, so the lair is prompted to switch into a hive so that it can finish expanding.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The only time that they make the hive transition is extremely risky in the metagame and in general, because it takes a lot of resources to get that out. And you don't see, like, if you're pressuring a Zerg a whole bunch, they're going to be forced to make roaches, they're going to be forced to, make spine crawlers, things like that, defensive things, and they're not going to be necessarily able to get out the hive. Which is kind of interesting, because you can kind of use the fourth and fifth bases that we talked about earlier, particularly if they, let's say they attack your fourth, well, then you have your 5, right? Your 5th one. Then they go to take out your 5th, well, you reestablish your 4th. They use those foremost bases almost as, decoys. What I mean, so that the pressure isn't on the layer necessarily. It's all about creating that space and creating that, resource pool that allows them to go into this super major workers, the UltraLiSKs, and then of course the greater spire, where you get the broodlords and the corruptors as well. And corruptors don't often stray far from broodlords, and broodlords don't often stray far from hives, right? They're not terribly mobile. With the UltraLiSK, I can see them being a little bit more mobile when included with like a Zerg or a Zergling based army.
Yeah, well,
presumably though, once you have the broodlords, the edge of the enemy territory they're already considering the enemy base as their territory.
Yeah.
They've got the creep there. They've been in and out of that base multiple times. They've tried to take it out. And so this is them saying, okay, this is now our territory. You are all dead. And that you see that with ants too. Once they get to a certain size and they start expanding their territory, around these some of these large colonies of South American ants, you can actually see them from air. They've got like 6 to 10 meters circumference around them of just everything is dead.
Yeah.
There's no plant.
I've seen pictures of that.
And they actually, if something like a beetle lands, they're all over it. They disassemble it alive. They don't care. That's their territory, and they keep expanding till it becomes inefficient for them to push any further. Yeah. So that's what you're kind of seeing with this.
Okay. I think in terms of the hive tech, it's interesting the two choices. You said ultras were kind of a lot more mobile, and that's true. I think that talking about Zerg as a rapid mutation, rapid reaction type of race, I think UltraLiSKs are mutated a lot more in cases where it's time to bring the noise immediately to them and just like wipe them out
as the backbreaking move, or they've got a tank line, you have to break this. So yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
it's more of a response.
Yeah, the broodlords are a lot more of this inexorable. If you can't cross the line of the broodlords ever. It just doesn't work. All you can do against broodlords is when they do get to your base, because they will, backed by a bunch of other units, because they'll have those. All you can do is just try and survive, and more often than not, you don't.
Yeah, it's true. They you have to have the right unit composition. The thing with the broodlords that I like that you point this out. Excuse me, I'm a little bit burpy as I'm drinking Coke right now, so I'm trying to.
Oh, okay, that's all right.
Yeah, anyway, the thing that I like that you've pointed out about the broodlords, and this will build on it, is while the UltraLiSKs are a little bit more reactionary, it's sort of a knee-jerk, like, okay, I see a weakness, I'm just going to end you now. The Broodlords very much so are planned. They are meticulous. You got to get the hive tech, you got to get sometimes the spire, then the greater spire. That all takes time. Then you got to build corruptors as well, which you can do while you're making the greater spire. But then you have to build the Broodlords. It takes a hell of a long time and a hell of a lot of resources to get these things out. So it's not like they just kind of can react and go, oh, surprise, 15 Broodlords. This is a tech that they're building to, planning to end the resistance that they've scouted out and know. So that's such a cool dichotomy that I didn't actually think of before, which is really awesome. And then alternatively, let's say they manage to stop your Broodlord army by producing a ton of Vikings. Oh, surprise, tons of UltraLisks. And that's that reactionary thing that we talked about, right?
Yeah, you never see someone build an army of Broodlords, have it get killed, and then build another Broodlord army. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I've seen it like one or two times. It's really that's sort of the thing, right? If you can kill the Broodlord army and push immediately, I mean, for the Zerg, it's kind of weird to think about it, but the Broodlords kind of are like them putting a lot of their eggs in one basket and saying, "You're not going to be able to stop us."
Literal eggs.
Yes, literal eggs. All the eggs in one basket. Whereas with the UltraLisk, there is significant ability to rebound. But they could also be using, produce, say, 5 or 6 Ultras, push into a tank line or something. Okay, so the Terran starts producing a ton of Marauders. And that could be, the part of the plan, Force the reaction to Ultralisks, and then ultimately we'll just move with Broodlords and call it a day.
Yeah. And that's...
Zerg only A-moved.
What?
I thought Zerg only A-moved.
Oh, dude, that is so not true.
Dude, sometimes we have to press F for.
Sorry, right? I forgot Infestors, the big fat thing that was designed after a Blizzard worker's turd.
Yeah. So that's all right though. So that's kind of, and then once you get to the hive too, I think that's where they start, expanding outwards, where they'll send an overlord with some drones and stuff, where they start, outwardly colonizing more and more of the planet with separate hatcheries and hives. Which would make sense, because ants don't really start producing a ton of queens to go and spread the species until they've reached critical mass, until they can function on their own and they're able to just crush anything in their territory.
So wait, what happens after all of the planet's resources are just gone? What do they do about the hive and hatcheries and stuff that are there? Do
they just leave? That's fine.
And just pretend that the hive and hatcheries no longer exist?
Did we already have this conversation?
No.
I could have sworn I asked the same question 10 minutes ago.
Maybe we ignored you.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
We might have been too excited about the Mutalisk.
No, because you gave the reference Charm, Marsara, and Iron.
Oh, yeah. Well, let's say it takes a lot. It takes a long time.
Thing is, we never actually answered the question because we went on some other tangent.
No. What he said was what happens to the life. What you're saying is what happens to the resources, which is an important distinction.
Well, I think that the Zerg, not only do they have abilities like Consume, so they can repurpose a lot of this stuff, but it takes a hell of a long time to be able to drain a planet completely dry of resources. People are trying their damnedest, and we've been along how long?
A long time.
Yeah, about a million
but the thing is,
species.
Zerg, once they get started, they're constantly multiplying they're exponentially increasing in their numbers.
True.
Humans aren't really doing that as much.
Are you kidding me?
Not on the scale of the Zerg, though.
Dude, go Google population counter and just watch the growth.
Yeah, it's pretty disgusting.
Okay, well, what I meant was not on the scale of Zerg, where you can start with one drone and then be bam.
Oh my god.
Wow, really?
Is somebody dying?
Speaking of population counter...
You're having a baby.
As I was saying, before I was rudely interrupted by an asshole in a fire truck.
Jeez.
Nothing can compete with the Zerg in terms of multiplication, except maybe rabbits.
Well, there's beetles and ants are pretty damn good at it too, though.
Yeah.
What you can do?
Rats.
Yeah, they are one of those things. Here's the thing. I imagine that Zerg, like an ant colony, they cap their growth. So they'll only reach a certain amount of individuals, and then they'll sort of maintain that, right? Unless they need to, unless say they're being pressured and then they make a whole bunch more. Hence the supply cap, right?
But they're just there for
for balance, but
for multiplayer issues.
Then again, you're not gonna. It would make zero sense once you've colonized an entire planet to continue endlessly making broodlords. I mean, it's
true.
It's simply retarded. Unless you're planning on moving all of those units to a different planet for an invasion or a colonization. Let's just say, they're content with their planet for whatever reason. They're not going to make an endless swarm of things. They're not. They don't have the resources. So you can't do it. So there is definitely going to be a cap. It's not going to be 200 supply, but it certainly is reflected in there being a supply cap for a lot of superorganisms. In fact, all of them.
I think the other thing is, without the Cerebrits, the Queen of Blades now has to control every Zerg swarm on her own, and maybe she just doesn't want to commit that much to any one fight, because, why would she?
Multitask.
She may be Korean level multitasking, but
that's true.
I think she does a better job of using overlords and overseers and things like this to. And she even introduced the Queen, which is sort of a local hatchery management system. So she really takes a lot of the micromanaging task work out of her hands, whereas the larger plans, okay, she'll say, we need to push into this section of Tarsonis or whatever, right? And then that'll be up to the overlords to sort of go, okay, well, we're seeing, a lot of marauders, so we need to make a lot of Zerglings.
Or broodlords.
Yeah. So I think that's what's going on.
What race do you play that you think the reactive counter to Marauders is Broodlords?
I play random.
Okay.
Well, maybe
that's about a lie. Broodlords counter Marauders.
Yeah.
What?
I'm looking at the late game scenario because if the Zerg is pushing out and needs to scout somewhere, then odds are it's not the beginning.
That's true.
Well, we also see this a lot in various other species because when you colonize an area and then all the other species, due to your success, become deterred, we get this bottleneck effect. And so since there aren't the other species to compete and thrive with you, then you eventually end up becoming impeded on your growth.
Not necessarily, but yeah, you certainly see bottlenecks like that. There was one in the end Devonian, I believe. There was certainly one in the end Permian and the end Cretaceous as well, which were three of the bigger extinction events on the planet. The Permian, there was something along the lines of 95% of life died. It was ridiculous. There was a lot that died. So yeah, anyway, we're sort of at time here, guys. So I'll get sort of last thoughts or comments before I kick you off. Anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been the Zerg Ecology episode, and we will do another one for Brood War, and we're going to do another one for Heart of the Swarm, but we'll probably do that one after we have access to the campaign.
Heart of the Swarm.
Once we have access to all the juicy new units and things like that. So,
I have a Heart of the Swarm beta key.
Yeah, you don't have access to the campaign though.
That's true. We'll
so that's where we're going to see a lot of that Zerg Ecology coming up. They're implementing a lot of changes and things like that. So it'll be awesome. So, and again, here's a reminder, tell your friends, that we're awesome and that they can join in the fun, and you can send me emails. I can't remember where it was put down, or it's better to just send me a PM on YouTube or to just post on the comments. I do read them all. I don't necessarily reply to them all anymore, but it's life. Okay, well, hope you guys enjoyed. We'll probably have a few more before Christmas.